people, they want to do the right thing. I'm not, it just, everyone gets caught up in the mess, and you got to play the game. And it's unfortunate because I think there are good people that want to do good things, but everyone gets caught up in the politics. And frankly, I think, the introduction of social media has made it a lot more difficult to be in Congress, because everything you say and do can be put out everywhere, and that's a problem. So people are doing politics through social media, which impacts on negotiations and letting them do their jobs, and that's a big part, in my view, big part of the problem.
Trucking is difficult. It's an essential industry that every corner of the nation depends on, even without knowing it. To the average consumer, the supply chain is magic, and sometimes a black hole. Products on store shelves, dinner on restaurant tables, packages on doorsteps. It's expected to be there on time, every time, and only recognized if there's a service failure. But how is a sausage made? Who's talking about the issues that matter to trucking companies?
Welcome to True North Truck Thought, or the TTT Pod for short. A monthly podcast hosted by Bipartisan Transportation Consulting and brought to you by True North Companies. We're here to demystify the magic, address the black holes, and to talk trucking to the industry we love. Whether it's the latest research, upcoming laws and rules, safety issues and solutions, or practical discussions about real-life supply chain challenges, the TTT Pod is here to help the most important industry in our country to navigate its greatest challenges and opportunities. We bring together some of the best and brightest experts to talk about and tackle some of the most pressing industry issues. So without further ado, I'm Steve Kepler.
And I'm Sean Garney. Let's get trucking. Hello, and welcome back to the TTT Podcast. For episode 16, we thought it appropriate to start off the new year by talking about what will come to trucking vis-a-vis government action this year. 2023 saw a virtually paralyzed Congress due to a deep partisan divide and buttressed by infighting within the Republican Party. Meanwhile, the administration got its feet under it and accelerated its efforts in anticipation of a tough re-election battle ahead for President Biden. Now, as we head into a huge election year, many in the trucking industry and beyond are trying to read the tea leaves to help them prepare for what's to come in 2024 as the economy continues to normalize. And so today, we'll be covering the waterfront on government actions or inactions expected this year, what motor carriers should expect, and how they might prepare. With us today is our old friend Bert Mayo, Vice President of Risk Solutions at True North, a lifelong industry vet with experience driving and working in the trenches with motor carriers to improve safety and compliance. Bert, welcome back to the podcast.
Good morning. Happy New Year. Belated Happy New Year.
Yeah. Well, as we move into the new year, the most important event coming to us, of course, is the Super Bowl. Steve and I, as Bills and Ravens fans, are a little bit bitter about this. And so, Bert, I have to ask you how your team is doing, but I have to warn you, if your team is Kansas City, this could be a short podcast. So, Bert, how are we doing in your NFL pool?
Go Gators. Go Gators.
All right. I'm for that.
You had to bring that up, Sean. I was in a good place, and now not so much.
Totally brutal.
So just so y'all know, the real power here at True North is a wonderful individual, Amy Souter, and she's a Chiefs fan. If you're not a Chiefs fan, nothing happens for you at True North. So I'm a Chiefs fan, just simply because of Amy.
Goodness.
Go Chiefs, Amy.
I'm against it. All right. Well, hey, maybe we'll move on to the topic at hand, government regulation. I think for our regular listeners, they're used to Steve and I sort of inviting our experts, which include Bert and others, and sort of driving the conversation. But today, one of Bipartisan Transportation Consulting's strength is, of course, monitoring and interacting with the government, helping motor carriers prepare for what might come. So we thought we might flip the script a little bit. Bert, if you're okay, hand the baton to you. You can fire some questions, try to lead us through these murky waters as we prepare for 2024. What do you say?
Multiple pages of expert questions prepared. Are y'all ready?
Oh boy. No, not ready. We'll try anyway.
So, well, to start off, let me correct your statement, Sean. Industry experts are not on this side, they're on that side. That's why the script has been flipped. So we're going to ask the true industry experts the questions today. So let's jump right in.
Good. Yeah.
I guess it's probably what everybody's expecting, though, right now as we head into an election year, which I hate to say that. They come more frequently the older I get somehow. That's shocking to me. But here we are at another one. So knowing that 2024 is a presidential election year, can we expect anything to get done this year? Anything, much less what's going to happen in our industry.
Yeah, so I'll hop in here. It's an awesome question. There's a couple things at play here. Can we expect much to get done from a congressional standpoint? And I think the answer is quite clearly no. Can you guys guess how many bills Congress passed last year and were enacted by the president?
That's a good question. Yeah.
27. Lowest year since the Great Depression. And so I think given that it was such a tough year last year, it's very unlikely that we see anything of real significance come from Congress outside of stuff that they need to pass. And on the flip side, I think Biden, entering this election year is really looking to deliver on some of his campaign promises as much as he can through administrative action, agency rules or guidance or that sort of thing. And from there, I think his campaign promises, he's really going to focus here continually on labor, the environment, and on safety. I think those are places he thinks he can win, at least with his base. And then of course, I think they'll work to accelerate certain things to try to, complete any sort of legacy priorities that they might have. You think that's about right, Steve?
Yeah, I mean, one of the signature pieces of legislation of his administration is the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. And so, and that's chock full with a lot of things, and I would agree with that. There's a lot of focus on labor, not just through that bill, but through rulemakings and other activities, and the environmental issues certainly are at play. So, yeah, I mean, I think in pushing money out the door, being, supply chain issues, lots of funding going to different parts of transportation.
Good point.
I think one of the interesting things about that, that I think one of the downstream effects that it is going to, from a safety perspective, I think that we need to think about is work zones. Work zone crashes are a problem. We're going to see lots of work zones. And this isn't just a trucking issue, but it's a worker safety issue. So OSHA and those types of things, I think some of those downstream effects that really need to be watchful of.
I think that's a great point, Steve, which I hadn't really thought of as much as, and we're reading a lot about it in the trade press, Biden and his administration just really pushing money out the door from the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. He's going to want to continue to remind voters of that bipartisan piece of legislation that passed, and we'll continue to see additional announcements on grant funding and different infrastructure projects, truck parking, that sort of thing. And Steve, 100% correct. If I'm a motor carrier and I'm thinking, well, what does this mean for me? It means let's talk to my drivers about operating in a work zone. I think that's a fantastic call out.
Yeah, great point, guys. I mean, to your point, the public sees that as progress in some way, right? They see their lives potentially getting easier and more efficient. But our industry, that's a big challenge. I mean, and it's happening. All of us travel every week, and we see that all over America right now. And what I'm hearing is we think this is just going to get more of a challenge.
Yep, agree 100%. We'll see a lot more of those signs that say, this project was brought to you by the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law on the side of the road.
Absolutely.
So,
well, and I saw there's been some stuff in the news the last couple of weeks or so. People are complaining now about messages on variable message signs. So it's
NHTSA put out that rule that said you can't say anything funny on those road signs because we don't want drivers laughing as they drive by. So
anything that must get done that we've seen hang around that y'all think that has to be completed, or at least get?
Yeah, Bert, that's the challenge. And Steve and I were talking about this yesterday. There's not a lot that must get done. The appropriations process needs to get done. So it seems like we've got some agreement, at least on top line numbers, and that folks are working to actually push out 12 different appropriations bills, which is not the norm anymore. It's mostly been minibuses or omnibus bills that contain lots of appropriations. A few other things like FAA reauthorization, but not a lot that absolutely has to go, which is notable because, as we know, the last several years, Congress really only legislates by crisis, right? They need to be up against a deadline, and then they deal only with this crisis. But then what happens is all of these other priorities that people have been working on, all these little bills, well, the old paperclip comes out and it just gets attached to this must sign piece of legislation, and then it goes through. So if there's any hope of things happening from a trucking perspective in Congress, I think that's the primary path that it'll take. What do you think, Steve? What do you think? Are there pieces of legislation out there that we should look out for that might get paperclipped? Or,
Well, I think it's a good question. In an election year, you see a lot of marker bills just thrown out there, people introducing stuff just so they can campaign on it. And what happens, because of your point, Sean, all these money-based bills become a vehicle to attach, all the ornaments on the Christmas tree. And there's lots of these things in the right now. The biggest conversation is relating to the border, right? And so there's this horse trading going on. So I think, yeah. So what you have to look for is bills that have bipartisan support. So you've got bipartisan support, Democrats and Republicans, and hopefully you've got support on the House and the Senate. And so there's not a ton that are in that space right now. I think Sean, you mentioned it earlier. I think truck parking is an issue that has pretty wide support, not just on the congressional side, but on the administration side. So I think that's an area. There is some relative support for issues with hazmat and endorsements and TWIC with duplicative background security checks. So there's a few things here and there that have that broader support. But the challenge is when they don't legislate and these policy riders, no one wants, particularly when it's crunch time and they got to get a bill passed, they don't want any policy riders holding things up. So it's a challenge.
Yeah, Steve, on the whole messaging legislation thing, I was just looking up at Congress's progress over the years, and they took 267 votes so far this session in Congress, which is actually not that far outside of the norm. If you annualize that, over 2 years, that'd be 534, which is about average, a little low, but about average. But we're only passing 27%. So as our listeners see all of the headlines come through about all of these important bills that are being brought up, I think we should definitely look at them with an eye toward a paralyzed Congress without much must-to-dos out there. So.
Yeah.
That sets me up perfectly, Sean, for the next question is how do we get things done in this age of divided government? How do we get more bipartisanship?
Oh, man. Boy, if I had an answer to that problem, I certainly would offer it. I mean, I think politics is so divided and entrenched right now that it's about building coalitions. I think I look to the coalition that ATA built on the hazmat harmonization bill, which is 150 organizations deep. Now that's something that might get done. So I think building that momentum or that chatter is really one of the only ways we can go here, outside of waiting for the next crisis in Congress. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I would tend to agree there. What you've seen the last couple of years, and this creates some angst also, is you've seen a lot of presidents increasing more executive orders and executive actions on things that, and trying to stretch their authority. And so you've seen some things challenged in court because of that, because the administration gets frustrated from Congress. Say, okay, well, you know what, I'm going to do it and come after me. And so I think that creates another level of difficulty, and kind of breaks with the norm of how things traditionally are done politically, and the separation of powers between the various branches of government. And so I think that, that type of trend is not good. But I don't blame the administration, because Congress is dysfunctional. And I think the public, you ask the public, most of them feel that way. Both sides, doesn't matter where you sit.
Yeah, and so I have 2 points on that, Steve. You're right that administrative action has taken hold as a way to actually accomplish things that the administration prioritizes. Of course, there's a big case in front of the Supreme Court this year, and I'm not a constitutional scholar, so I won't get that far into it. But it revolves around the Chevron deference, which was a case many years ago where the Supreme Court decided, hey, because Congress hasn't specifically spoken on this, we're going to grant deference to the agency's experts as far as the appropriateness of this particular rule. And that doctrine is being questioned in the Supreme Court. And if the Supreme Court should say the Chevron deference is inappropriate, then we could move closer to a space where the administrative branch the executive branch really can only work on things Congress has specifically called out. And of course, that's probably a little bit hyperbole, and I'm no lawyer, but I do think that's a concern. And the other thing to that point is, let's think back to when Trump was elected initially, right? And one of the first things that happened, Congress flipped as well. And all of a sudden, the Congressional Review Act became the big sexy term that everybody wanted to talk about, because it meant that any recently passed rules could be overturned by a majority vote in Congress. And of course, a signature by the president. And so I think the administration is eager to get some of its very important, or rules that it feels is very important, out sooner rather than later, to try to avoid the Congressional Review Act, which has a limited time span during which it can be used. So,
and I think the last thing that I'll mention here is, Congress needs to do a better job. They need to stop the politicking and really do what they were sent to Congress to do, and that's support the people that voted them there, and pay attention to their issues, and let bygones be bygones. You need to work collectively and be adults.
Who are you, Steve? Do you even know how Congress works?
Yes, I do. I do. No, but I think there's people, they want to do the right thing. I'm not.
You're right. You're right.
It just, everyone gets caught up in the mess, and you got to play the game. And it's unfortunate, because I think there are good people that want to do good things, but everyone gets caught up in the politics. And frankly, I think, the introduction of social media has made it a lot more difficult to be in Congress, because everything you say and do can be put out everywhere, and that's a problem. So people are doing politics through social media, which impacts on negotiations and letting them do their jobs, and that's a big part, in my view, big part of the problem.
And to that point, Steve, I think it's more important today than ever that for motor carriers, let's keep it in our world, that their voices be heard. And the only way to do that, I see effectively, is join your state associations, join the ATA, join the TCA, join NTTC, whoever it is, that's what they do, is help push that message.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, they've got a tough job up there on the Hill, and they've got lots of issues and constituencies to serve. And if they don't see you, they assume everything's okay. So you've got to put the time and energy in, and make sure they are educated on things that are important to you, for sure.
Yep. Being part of your state, and this is not an advertisement for that, but being part of your state trucking association, to me, is one of the most important things motor carriers can do.
Amen. You know, the thing is, like, you as a carrier are facing problems. Other carriers have faced that problem.
That's right.
Where are those carriers? They're at your state association,
Yep.
So what a great way to improve. In fact, the ATRI study came out, was it mid-year last year, that said, if you join your state association, you're more likely to have a strong safety and compliance record. So, they go hand in glove for sure.
Yep.
Absolutely. Well, speaking of some more things up on the Hill, we've had kind of a revolving door up there here. Steenberg late last year, and then Hutchinson and Adam. Any of that impacting what's going on up there? It seems a little bit unstable to me right now.
Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
Both nodding. So, Steve?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the history of the agency, they've had very few leaders that have been there for any really lengthy period of time, and less than half were confirmed, and so it's not surprising that this happens. The challenge, I mean, FMCSA is a difficult job anyway, with all the different constituencies they need to deal with, and so having a lack of a confirmed leader, and now you've got the top two politicals that have left. I've left and so I think that will impact on things. Certainly, some major rules probably will get set aside that they were working on. So you've got that. Plus, it's an election year. I just think you're going to have not a lot of traction on any significant rules. We saw one significant rulemaking report just came out yesterday, and one of them already is kicked down the road. Several have been kicked down the road. So I think you're going to see them focusing on things that aren't maybe as controversial or politically charged.
Yeah, I agree, Steve. And I had the good fortune of speaking with one of the more senior FMCSA folks left in the administration just last week. And sort of asked him a little bit about, hey, with Robin gone and Adams gone, like, how's this going to impact your momentum going into the year? And, the response was essentially, well, it depends on the temperament and the experience of the person coming in, right? If they're inclined to grant some deference to longtime agency bureaucrats, then we could get some things done. But if they're more inclined to sort of be questioning and really slow walking things, and we're less likely to see that. And we saw that with the proposed CSA changes, which took forever to come out, despite the fact that we had intelligence that they were pretty much locked and loaded about 3 administrators ago. So it's a good call. I want to talk a little bit about significant rulemakings report, because it did come out. It's far less regular than it used to be. It used to be like a monthly report. Now it seems like a semi-annually report. But I looked at it, and there are 11 rules on the significant rulemaking report. And for those listening, to be a significant rule, it needs to be what is the threshold, Steve? Is it 100 million?
100 million. Yeah.
100. It needs to have over 100 million in costs, or it needs to be sort of a politically charged issue. There are 11 rules on there. 6 of those rules do not have a due date, right? So 6 of them show we don't know when we're going to publish it, and the other 5 are have due dates on them, but only one is scheduled to go to final this year. So just a few interesting tidbits from the rulemaking report.
Anything that has to happen needs to be, in your opinion, Sean, needs to get done sooner than later?
Man. Well, that's a great question. And I have a few thoughts on that. One is, just earlier this week, FMCSA came out with their CDL flexibility notice of proposed rulemaking, which I think has really great potential to increase throughput of new drivers into the industry. It's going to make testing easier. It's going to allow them flexibility in where they get trained versus where they get licensed. And it's going to get them on the road sooner. And so if there's one thing I'd like to see continue to move forward, it's that one. Of course, the proposal just dropped, so we're a little farther out. So that's one I'd call out, and there's others, but certainly I want to hear what Steve thinks is.
Well, I look at it, and I don't have. If I had to pick one, and I really don't want to have to pick one, but I will.
Well, it's Bert's show, so Bert, can you choose two or what?
Steve, you get two. John got one.
All right. Well, I look at this through two lenses. One is what's most impactful on safety, and two, what's most impactful on relieving burden or providing flexibility to the industry. Right? To me, those are the two lenses that I look at it from. And Sean, CDL flexibility was on my list as kind of in that second bucket. I also would put, the data queues appeals process, crash preventability, and to some degree CSA in that bucket. And also the California meal and rest break preemption issue because of, the potential that has to be a big problem with hours of service. On the safety side, if I had to choose, the AEB rule, because that, if you look at kind of the numbers of it impacts on crashes and safety, that's got significant impacts. But I think the CDL CLP downgrade rule, that's, it's on track, getting prohibitive drivers off the road. I will put that in that bucket. And I would, oral fluids and hair testing also. So, and another one that, I don't know, a lot more than two here, but one that,
I was just about to say, who's keeping score
here? One more that a lot of folks won't. It's not an FMCSA, it's a NHTSA, and it was directed out of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, and the directive to mandate interlocking devices on cars for impaired driving. So there you go.
Thank you, Steve.
Tough to know where to start there. That's a big list.
Sorry.
Well, so your comment, how you started that on safety, which I love, right? Which is kind of where my world is just staying in protecting, improving safety on America's highways and roadways, right? I just think that's kind of always been my charge in life, and something that kind of sneaks in there at times, and there's debate whether it impacts or not. But hours of service, we saw an increase in May. I believe there was a study I read that we saw an increase in roadside violations and hours of service. Is that prompting anything? What do y'all see happening there?
So it's interesting because, having been in the industry a long time, been watching all of this, hours of service is always on the list of things to talk about. It is relatively quiet right now on that front. There's a few things we're waiting for. We're waiting for FMCSA to finalize its improved definition of what is a yard move, which should give some carriers and drivers additional flexibility on using yard move in circumstances where the private property might not be controlled by a gate, which has sort of been, part of the definition previously. So we're waiting on that, which I think could be important. There's an ag haulers exception that we're waiting for to be finalized, but that won't have much impact because we're already under an interim final rule there. And then ELD technical revisions. So FMCSA is looking at how to improve the ELD rules to make it easier or to make it more efficient and to create additional oversight mechanisms for the agency to enforce its rules against ELD providers. So I guess that's that. And also I'd say don't sleep on Canada, who's still working on improving their ELD regulations and beginning enforcement. So if you're operating in Canada, ELD issues, training drivers to communicate with roadside enforcement, all of that I think are going to be important from an hours of service perspective. And so there's my two. or 3 or 4.
Steve, you mentioned hair testing. Any other big changes? I know we got clearinghouse coming up in November, prohibitive drivers in the clearinghouse. Any other changes coming in drug testing?
Yeah, I mean, there are some things on the docket for appeals for employer-decided refusals, and also electronic forms and signatures and record keeping. The other thing that's the 800-pound gorilla is marijuana, and with legalization in the states and the pot and HHS recommending the DEA to take it from a Schedule 1 to Schedule 3 drug. So I think that issue right there, I think, is going to take some oxygen out of the conversation this year, because you're going to see more and more. There's lots of activity going on with one of the big challenges is roadside testing for drugs, and having a device or types of devices that can help test roadside, and you're seeing some advancements there. So I think that's going to continue to be a challenge in the drug testing space. I think back to hours of service for 1 second, and Sean covered pretty much what I would suggest too. I also, the California Washington Mill rest break issue. But the other thing that is the FMCSA is working on kind of behind the scenes that hasn't been talked about quite a bit, and this is through collaboration with CVSA. They're doing a study on personal conveyance and looking at the impacts of what is contributing to personal conveyance, why it's happening. So they've got a questionnaire list that roadside enforcement is addressing with drivers when they find them operate using personal conveyance. So they're doing a study collecting roadside data. And this is precipitated by a couple of petitions for rulemaking by CVSA to try and get more clarity on the definition. So I suspect, that study is ongoing. They started it last year. So I suspect we'll hear something about that this year in terms of the results of that study and potential action either by the agency or CVSA.
Yeah, good call out, Steve. And sorry, I missed those on hours of service. Appreciate you grabbing those. Want to circle back to drugs and alcohol. Just a few things that I think carriers are thinking about. You mentioned the downgrade rule. So, just for background, we've had the clearinghouse in place for a long time. Well, 3 years, 4 years almost. And so the one challenge has been, of course, once a driver is prohibited from operating a commercial motor vehicle, they still have a valid CDL. They're just prohibited in the clearinghouse. And so there's some thought that is a loophole. That means that drivers can continue to operate even if they've had one of these violations that technically doesn't allow them. And so FMCSA came out with a subsequent rule that said, hey, states, listen here. If a driver in your state ends up on the clearinghouse, we're going to send you a push notification. All right. And you need to take that push notification and begin your downgrade process. Right. So we're going to make your license inactive or, downgraded so that you're not allowed to operate this commercial motor vehicle. Or their states will be required to review the clearinghouse record before they take a licensing action like issuance, renewal, or upgrade, or that sort of thing. And if they're prohibited, they'll be taken off the road. Really good news for the industry here, with, of course, the warning that it could take the state up to 60 days to downgrade any one of these licenses. So we could have, we know that from the clearinghouse, we end up having two buckets of drivers, right? We have the driver who fails the drug test and says, okay, that's enough for me, I'm going somewhere else. And that, sadly, so far has been the bulk of those that have been listed in the clearinghouse. But then there's this other bucket of drivers who do go through the process. And you can pretty quickly go through the process and take that initial return to duty test and be authorized to drive. And that could happen before 60 days, right? And so there'll be some inconsistency there. And it's just a warning to motor carriers to say, hey, let's make sure that we're closely scrutinizing clearinghouse records, that we're really understanding the full picture before we take actions, because we know states are slow and not great at transmitting data and a whole bunch of other things. And so, let's be careful there. And then the last thing I want to mention on on drug testing, of course, is hair testing, right? And we've all been waiting for something to happen on hair testing. The Department of Health and Human Services came out with a rule or a proposed rule several years ago that said, okay, you can use hair testing, but if the driver tests positive for hair testing, you need to confirm it with a urine test, which is about the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen proposed on paper. So, of course, widespread industry concern over this. It has the potential to drive carriers away from hair testing, not towards hair testing. And so HHS is working on a new rule. They're now working on a supplemental notice of proposed rulemaking. But I was looking at these, and I don't think it's a misprint from the website. And Steve, maybe you can confirm. They've had an SNPRM at OMB since March of last year. And so something's hung up with that thing.
Yeah.
There is probably some big political concerns, maybe some, financial justification concerns. And it's potentially a topic or an area that the Biden administration is less enthused to sort of continue. So I know we're all eager to hear what they're going to say on hair testing. I am too, but I'm losing a little faith in the process, at least for 2024, to get anything significant that would be actionable.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's odd that it'd be sitting at OMB that long.
90 days they're supposed to get done.
Supposed to, yeah. And I think there are some political things going on there too. There was some direction in Congress several years back on some areas they were concerned about with respect to hair testing, because it could be some bias in terms of how it treats certain parts of the population versus others. So that could be weighing in on that.
Sean, I want to ask you something to clarify. You said that was about the most ridiculous thing you've ever seen written down on a piece of paper.
Oh, no. Okay.
What was the most ridiculous thing you've ever seen written down?
Oh, shoot. Can I park that question? Give me a little minute.
Let's park that.
Okay.
It has to relate to this podcast, by the way. I don't want to hear some letter from somebody in the past. Okay, let's get to the big one.
I know what it is. Years ago.
Let's get to the big one. Speed limiter rule. Yeah. Speed limiter rule.
Speaking of big gorillas in the room.
Yeah, right. Well, in the significant rulemaking report that just came out, they punted it, kicked it down the road until I think May, another 5 months to get a supplemental pushed out, which, based on our conversation earlier, I think it's a recipe for it not happening.
For not happening.
So that would be my guess. But I know there's lots of, there's Congress has weighed in on this. I see it not having an administrator. I just see it. I think that's a recipe for it being kicked down the road.
I think that's right, Steve. And with such a cacophony of opposition to this rule, if we're making political calculations,
that's a 50-cent word.
Hey, thank you. I appreciate that. So if I'm making sort of political assessments and I'm the Biden administration, I'm thinking, yeah, you know what? Let's slow walk this thing. Let's not tell 750,000 motor carriers and 8.5 million truck drivers, 3.5 million truck drivers that we're gonna govern your truck and you can only drive so fast. There's a sentiment among the trucking industry that maybe that wouldn't be the most popular thing. And so I think I'd agree with Steve that we're looking at a slow walk here. I still stand firm on my prediction. If it ever does come out, 68. I still think 68 is the number, but we may not see anything.
What about changes to CSA? Can we expect anything there? Safety rating process.
God willing.
I think that will happen. That is something I do think will happen, particularly because it's technically not a rule. They've put out notice and comment. They've got feedback. They only had 176 comments, I think, on that order. Some opposition, but I think we will see that. I think we'll see that. I think we'll see them address the data queues appeals notice they put out. I think they'll also up the crash preventability. I think, we talked earlier about one of the significant rulemakings kicked down the road. The safety fitness determination rule was punted to 2025. And I think that, and if you look at some of the congressional action on this over the years, one of the things that Congress directed back a number of years ago is that, the Government Accountability Office did a report on CSA, a number of recommendations and issues. We won't go into the details of it, but in the legislation that was surrounding that, one of the requirements was that the Inspector General had to certify that FMCSA did all these things before they could consider using CSA in safety fitness determination in assessing safety ratings. And my view of the world, and I don't know, I'd be interested to see Sean's viewpoint on this too, but my thinking is they're doing all these things to address all the findings from that GAO report, and then they're going to go to the IG and say, look, certify us, and they're going to try to use the SMS, CSA SMS in conducting safety ratings. That's my projection.
Yeah, Steve, I think that's right. I mean, we talked about the politics of the year, and if we're looking at opportunities for FMCSA to to be a little kinder to the industry, then the bulk of the industry commented in support or neutrally on CSA, but the industry absolutely agrees that improvements are necessary. And so I think that's politically favorable. Improving the data queues process, boy, there's a lot of complaints about the data queues process out there. And expanding the preventability program. These are all things that are not official rulemakings, as you mentioned, Steve, and that are popular. And so I definitely think this is a space where we could see some real change that impacts motor carriers in a positive way.
And you think that could happen this year?
Yes.
I like it.
I think this is stuff that carriers feel pretty quickly,
Yep.
And so if I'm pushing towards a favorable rating, that's one way for me to get there.
Yeah, I think the question that is with respect to CSA, your original question, Bert, is what's the effective date of the changes? Once they how much time are they going to give for a transition? Because there's not just motor carriers that are impacted. There's a number of suppliers that and other third party people. I mean, you guys use CSA data too, right? So there's a lot of third parties that have developed lots of tools and solutions to ingest that data and use it. And so and there are going to be kind of those downstream impacts on those types of companies to be able to adjust their tools to be able to support the changes.
Well, that's good news.
Yeah, I think so.
Did you think we were going to deliver good news on this podcast, Bert?
Not at all.
How about it? Yeah.
So question for you. What do you think is, from your perspective, you asked us about, what do you think would be an important, the most important or a couple things that could or should happen this year?
So I think I'm with you on the CSA or just the changes there. We've all been holding our breath for years, right? And we can tread water for a little while, but at some point we got to get pulled ashore. And you go back, I mean, I'm probably 10, 15 years ago now, right? No, 10 years. When all the data was coming out, it didn't impact safety in any way. It didn't impact crashes in any way. And we're still seeing, this is a personal thing, as both of y'all know. I call you probably daily on this if I call you about anything. It's driver fitness. That just is not impactful to the safety of an organization or motor carriers. Rarely, right? I'm sure there is a line somewhere in there. But I just like to see I would like to see that change, whether it's data queue or it's another a quicker avenue where the states are updating the licenses or something, some change, some help there.
Yeah, and there is some help on driver fitness potentially in the CSA changes, specifically additional segmentation of that particular base.
And threshold changes.
Yeah, and threshold changes too. So
Yep.
we could get some good news on that, Bert.
But I agree with you, Bert. If you look at research, there's in some, if you look at the ATRI, it's an inverse proportion. And,
yes.
And
we see, I see some of it's common things, right? Like the automatic transmission, restriction, or the driver gets LASIX and he still has his corrective lens requirement. And I know this isn't a shot at the enforcement side of this at all, because we need them to do what they do, and I appreciate them. But it's just like, man, and you put a motor carrier in ISS red for 18 months because of something like that.
Well, and I think to your point, in the comments, a lot of folks commented to the rule, to the rule in the CSA notice in terms of the changes. A lot of folks said, look, you need to separate out administrative type violations versus those that are more geared towards safety. And a lot of the driver fitness are what I would deem to be administrative in nature, somewhat similar to kind of form and manner on logs, right? So, and so I think there is space for, changes in that world to separate out those different types of violations. We'll see what they come out with.
Yeah, and I'd agree, and we could have a totally new podcast on this. Of course, nobody here is saying driver credentialing is unimportant or that drivers shouldn't have CDLs
exactly right.
And that sort of thing. But what we're saying is, like, we need to rationalize the process a little bit so that, one-off challenges don't inflate basic scores. And that's the problem. You can have a tiny, tiny driver fitness score, but so many of your peers have even fewer or a smaller that, your percentile score is inflated. So that's a challenge.
Well, this is a whole nother passion project of yours, Steve. But this is, to me, why beyond compliance. When I deal with motor carriers that have something happen, whether it be in the corrective lenses or whatever, I'm like, but their crash score is a 3 and their unsafe driving is a 4, but you have an ISS red? Are you kidding me? Mm-hmm. That's all right. Yeah. Y'all would be answering the questions. Dang it, Steve. Let me move on here with my 15 pages.
No, but you're right. And Bert, to your point, and just a plug for those of you that haven't seen our Beyond Compliance podcast, go see it. But I think to your point, to me, that's one of the other things on the list. If you were to say that could make an impact, that the agency should move forward with, that would be it too.
Yeah. Me too. And that's an amen on this end for that. Since I called out our enforcement brethren out there a minute ago, what do you see as the new enforcement initiatives coming in 2024 where the rubber meets the road? Our drivers out there, motor carriers listening to prepare their drivers. What do we see as a change coming for 2024 out
there? There's quite a bit happening, kind of behind some of it's behind the scenes, some of it's in front of the scenes.
But this is where so much of the action is happening right now.
Yeah.
As government slows down, others are stepping up and finding new ways to solve problems. So didn't mean to interrupt you, Steve, but yeah, it's an exciting space.
No, but you're right. We talked about the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law a little bit ago, but that provided a lot of enhanced resources to both FMCSA and the states. And so a lot of them there's a lot more research work going on by FMCSA, looking at, high-risk carriers, looking at kind of new entrants and crash performance and how does that impact. There's, last, I guess, a year and a half ago, FMCSA put out an ANPRM on unique identification for commercial vehicles, electronic identification. So we'll see where that goes. But there's
nowhere.
Yeah. CVSA is working on its level 8 inspection program, electronic inspection, and there's a joint effort between them and FMCSA. There's an operational test on
That's
that.
the future. Pay attention to that.
It's getting ready to start. This operational test. There's enhanced inspections for ADS vehicles. There's a lot of states that are using tire classic anomaly systems technologies to look at tire inflation and tire heat temperature. There's distracted driving technology that's being deployed in a couple of states. So there's a lot of things the states are doing. And I think probably one of the things that doesn't get really talked about quite a bit that's going to transform things for everybody is FMCSA is on this IT modernization effort. So they have a plan between now and 2026 to revamp all of their IT systems. They've started with their inspection software that has been launched. The next big effort is they're modernizing their whole registration system, the URS system, but they've got a plan out to 2026 that's going to revamp everything. That's going to change the paradigm on a lot of things, data quality issue, and into a whole host of things that are going to be addressed.
So, Steve, follow-up question here. Unpack this a little bit for us, because I do think it's as David O'Neill would say, a big deal, this industry modernization thing. But I think a lot of people might say, I'm glad you're getting a new computer, FMCSA, but how is this going to impact us? So can you just pull that apart just a little bit for us and say, how does enforcement get better? How does safety improve through modernization?
Well, a couple things. One, what's the biggest thing that's challenged for data queues? It's not my inspection, right? So the quality going into the system and all the error checks, all the quality and the cleansing, the ability for systems to talk to each other, that's a big one. And so I think, if you look at, there was a study that FMCSA just put out back in December on driver disqualifications and how they tracked from a roadside inspection all the way to the time that violation was adjudicated and posted to the driver's sitless record. And it was unbelievable how few of those violations made it to the record. 7%. 90,000 roadside inspections were conducted where a potentially disqualifying violation was identified by the inspecting officer, and only 6,300 of them were on the driver's history record once it got through the process. So we've got a huge data gap, and so modernizing the IT systems will be able to help in identifying those things. A lot of them were error problems, manual entry things. So a lot of that, once you automate some of those things, and you have much better technology to identify anomalies and deal with it, it's going to really help from a data quality perspective, I believe, both for the agency as well as for industry. So I think it's a huge effort, so they've got a pretty aggressive timetable.
Well, and even on the most basic level, this miners, just look at URS. Like, we hardly even know how many carriers and drivers are in the industry, because we don't have great data checks and, reporting and that sort of thing. So even modernizing URS will at least give us a better sense for scope of problem and that sort of thing.
And it's going to be better at identifying chameleon carriers, right? So that's a big problem in the industry.
Guys?
We know.
Carriers that go out of business.
That's right. So I think they're on a track. I think to really, if data is a big focus for them at the moment, I think focusing on the root problem and making sure their systems are all up to speed and current and modernized, I think has very long-term positive impacts.
Yeah, agree. Sorry, Bert, stole a question from you.
No, perfect. I think that I had one last question. I think this is what we'll close the show with. Sean, what was your most ridiculous thing you've ever seen? Written down.
Oh, man. Yeah. So back when CSA came out, we, as an industry, used to throw a lot of, shoot a lot of arrows at FMCSA to say, hey, you've not taken into account preventability or fault at all in any of these crashes you use to base your driver fitness or your crash indicator score on. And so we called on them to erect a preventability process. And what they said, of course, was, okay, we're going to study it. And then they studied it and they were like, well, this is impossible. There's no way we can do this because it's going to cost us $11 million and it's going to take 2 years to adjudicate a single crash. But here we are, however many years later, and we've got a process. So those are some early conclusions. And here's another one. When on CSA, when the recent changes came out and they were like, it is impossible for us to address geographic enforcement disparity because the states won't let us. That was pretty ridiculous too.
I'll tell you mine. I know you asked Sean, but I'll tell you mine.
Please.
Is
Please
FMCSA's decision to change their own decision on this California meal and rest break issue.
So much better than mine. I take mine back.
I mean, yeah, we're going to go against ourselves and we're going to let you challenge us.
I think that we need one of our podcasts coming up for 2024 needs to be the most ridiculousness or the most ridiculous.
Ooh, yes. I like that.
I like that. But I think the way that, because Sean knows this about me, if you're going to point out a problem or an issue, you got to offer a solution. So if we're going to do the most ridiculous things, we also should say the best things that we think have been done.
The things they did, just like correcting in California, let's give what happened to. I think give credit where credit's due. It's a functioning industry at times. It's very non-functioning at times, but good news for today. Sean, I'm going to let you close us out. Any closing comments before we go, Steve?
I think Steve's going to close us out, but I've got one last thing I want to say. There's one big rule that we didn't talk about today, and that was the definition of an independent contractor. And that final rule. And that is another big deal. Good news. Next month, we've got Greg Feary coming back. We got Chris Gulker coming back, kind of redoing a podcast we did on the notice of proposed rulemaking to help the industry learn about what's different and how to react. So that is a big deal we did not cover today, but we did not cover it because we're going to cover it in great detail next month.
Thanks, Sean. Right. You're absolutely right. Absolutely. Thanks for listening to this episode of True North Truck Thought. If you enjoyed the topic today and want to tune in for future conversations here on the TTT Pod, make sure to follow us. Also, please don't hesitate to let us know which topics you want us to cover in future episodes. Drop us a line in the comments section or send us an email to transportationnews@truenorthcompanies.com. Thanks and have a safe day.